Hello, I'm Cheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Let's face it, we're all going to die. We only hope it won't be too soon, too painful, too drawn out, and that we won't have to do it alone. In recent decades, advances in science and medicine have extended our lives by years. But is the fact that we can extend life for so long necessarily a good thing? Anne Newman, visiting scholar at the New York University Center for Religion and Media, has thought about this issue for a long time, and she set out on a quest to make sense of the process of dying and what constitutes a good death. Her book, The Good Death, An Exploration of Dying in America, has just been published by the Beacon Press. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Cheryl.
Now, you got interested in exploring how Americans die and why they die the way they do after caring for your father at the end of his life. What made you decide to quit your job and come and care for your father full time?
I was an administrator at NYU, and my father was a bachelor living alone. And I have a sister, but she had 2 infant children. And it seemed the only obvious way to make sure that he had what he needed. But also, I had no idea what was going to take place. I had this rather romanticized notion, maybe that I picked up from our media and our movies, that he would go home and put his head on the pillow and tell me that he loved me and then close his eyes, and that would be it. And I was very much broadsided by the experience, even after a 10-year diagnosis and even after every possible preparation.
So what was daily life like caring for your father?
Anything you would anticipate, cooking, cleaning, the bedclothes, and toward the end, he was vomiting a lot. But I think the emotional work of caring for someone who's dying is also incredibly challenging. So not only the visceral caretaking elements, but this kind of emotional facing of something that you don't really know how to face.
Did you have help taking care of him?
Yeah, we had hospice come into the home, like 1.2 million Americans out of 2.1 million who die. We had hospice come to the house and bring with them the things that we needed.
Now, your father, as you said, he lived with cancer for 10 years, and he had a certain notion of the way he wanted to die and where he wanted to die. And I assume he had given family members and doctors instructions on how he wanted to die. But that didn't happen. He did not wind up getting his wish.
Right. We had hospice at home for 3 months, and I was there for all of it within arm's length of him. And I think he too assumed that he would have what I just explained, this kind of very calm and quiet death. And yet he had what's termed terminal restlessness. And so he was incredibly agitated. We tried to address it with drugs like Ativan and morphine, but in the end he was combative, and we had to take him by ambulance to the nearest hospice facility.
So he did die in a hospice facility, but it was not the kind of death he had wanted to have.
He wanted to be at home, clearly. Again, 80% of Americans want that. They want to die in their own homes, and I think there's an element of independence that comes with that, desire to not be in an institution, and the desire to have family around you. And while we were able to get family there, and I think the facility was fabulous, it wasn't what my father wanted. I think because he and we didn't know what the dying process looked like.
Yeah. After his death, you spent some time abroad. What did you go to Europe? You traveled for about 1.5 years?
Yeah, I left the country for a while. I think to pursue that metaphor of grief as a journey, my cousin died 2 weeks before my father, and she was my age. And so I very much felt that I needed to see some things before I knew that time was not promised. And when I came back, the grief was all right there for me. It hadn't dissipated, and so I decided that I needed to take the next option, which was put my journalist hat on and figure out why I was so broadsided.
So what did you want to accomplish by researching this book? It wasn't exactly, I mean, you weren't writing a book about grief, you were writing a book about dying.
Right. Well, I wanted to know if the way my father had died was typical or atypical. I wanted to know if I had done everything possible. And so I became first a hospice volunteer, not knowing that I would ever write about it. And I started to see the experiences of other people who were dying, most in the home, but I also spent time in a hospice facility.
Okay, so tell me about some of your clients and what you learned from them.
Oh, I write often, I write extensively in the book about Marshall, who was a patient in an all HIV facility on the Lower East Side. And in this facility, there was a great fear of drugs because it was all HIV. There are two ways to contract HIV, which are drug use and sex. And so this kind of phobia of addiction pervaded the place. And
so you don't want them to give them too much pain medication.
Right. I have a scene in the book where I'm standing over this patient who is doubled over with pain, an expression that I didn't understand the meaning of until I saw him. And I remember saying to the doctor and the nurses, he needs something. We need to do something now. And the head nurse said, well, we're afraid to try methadone because it's so addictive. And I had to remind them in front of him that he was dying,
right,
and that addiction to a pain medication was so much less important than alleviating his pain.
And he finally did get the methadone.
He did, yeah.
And that was a great
Drugs
great
are wonderful
benefit.
for pain alleviation.
Right, right. Mr. Cortez was another patient you visited in his home?
Yes.
Tell me about him.
He lived in the projects at the Brooklyn Bridge on Lower Manhattan. And he had had Parkinson's for 25 years. So his wife was an extraordinary woman who had cared for him all this time. She was a crossing guard, and Saturday nights she would go to Mass, and she needed me or someone to stay with him while she did so.
And one thing you indicated was that he made an effort to show you the person he had been before he started dying. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think this is the great lesson of hospice care or end-of-life elder care, seeing these patients as individuals who have had full, rich lives, who still have something to give back to society, who can be good friends and good company. And he was very great company. I enjoyed my time with him. It wasn't as though I was slogging through as a volunteer duty.
Right.
So our relationship came to mean a lot to me.
Okay. And what had he been in his working life?
He had driven a limousine for about 2 decades.
Okay. There was Mr. Moore, who was in a prison hospice. He was a prison hospice patient. Tell me about that experience.
Well, we were just talking about pain, and I think pain in a hospice setting is its own thing. Pain, it's both physical and existential. And pain in a prison setting is altogether different. In some ways, we see pain as redemptive. We put prisoners in this place in order to reform them and make them be good members of society again. And so pain there holds a very different place when you're discussing end-of-life care. And I think in this hospice facility where drugs are rampant and where they are shamed and it's hard to keep them away from prisoners, the question of how well we alleviate pain in that setting is great, and I think should be talked about more.
Was there a lot of withholding of pain medication in the prison hospice setting? Were they under-medicated, I guess, in terms of pain?
I think that's the general condition, because patients are seen as deserving to suffer. In many cases, just in general society.
Yes, a lot of under-medication of pain everywhere,
absolutely.
not just in prisons.
Absolutely.
You had, and then Evelyn Livingston, quite a different kind of sort of person in hospice. Tell me about her.
I met Evelyn when the hospice facility said, oh, she's really difficult. Hospice coordinator said, she's very, very difficult. She wants someone to help her write her memoir. And so I went up apprehensive, not sure what I would find, and there was this beautiful woman seated cross-legged on an enormous sofa in the front room of a Central Park West apartment. And her circumstances were quite different from any other patient I had had. She was a doctor by training as well as a psychiatrist, and as soon as she received her diagnosis of lung cancer, she said, "That's it, I'm going home. I do not want to be in this hospital." And I think because she didn't go through the very painful and detrimental treatment, she knew that she was going to die, so she didn't go through chemotherapy. She lived a long time.
4 years, at least four. Is she still alive?
She died on December 2nd, the 10th anniversary of my father's death.
Okay, okay. But sort of the lesson here was that sometimes if you put people into a hospice setting, get them out of the hospital and disconnect the tubes and let them go home, they outlive hospice,
It's
right?
crazy, right? We tend to think of treatment as absolutely beneficial. It is going to save a life. And we forget that sometimes it just can't. And so these treatments we don't look at as painful or as life-shortening. But if you're pumping a lot of poison into someone's body, enough for their hair to fall out, enough for them to lose feeling in their feet, that has an effect on their well-being.
So if you had to sort of sum up, what were some of the good things about the hospices you saw, and what were some of the things that troubled you about hospice care?
Yeah, I was amazed at the caretakers, the employed doctors and nurses and social workers and clergy who spent all their time around people who were dying. And my initial reaction was, oh, how depressing. And I realized that it wasn't actually depressing. It was a population that I had no experience with. I was making a wrong judgment. And I learned that very quickly as a volunteer. But I do think that in some ways, hospice is a grassroots organization, and it reflects the culture and ethos of individual locations. So while the overarching umbrella of hospice, the objective is to keep patients comfortable as they die, I think there's an undertone of perhaps helping them to reflect on their regrets and make peace with their family members and those sorts of things. Some patients don't need that.
Yeah.
And so it's quite possible, I think, for patients to be pushed through that ideology.
We're going to take a short break. Then we'll be back with more with Ann Newman, author of The Good Death, An Exploration of Dying in America. Welcome back to One to One. I'm Cheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York, and I'm talking with Ann Newman, author of The Good Death, An Exploration of Dying in America. It's just been published by the Beacon Press. Are medicine and science helping people, in your view, to have a good death, or are they preventing it?
Yes, is the short answer. We have added 30 years to the human lifespan in the past century, and that is time that we wouldn't have had if it weren't for medical advancements, whether it's eradication of infant diseases or infectious diseases. But if you look back at the 1970s, the advent of respirators and defibrillators changed the definition of death so that we were relying on the brain as the indicator of whether a person was alive or dead. All of a sudden, we had ambulances and 911 services that could reach people and rehabilitate their systems. And so it changed the dying process. This elongation of the human lifespan did as well. And so now it takes us longer to die. We can prop up, say, a poor heart, and then the next problem, the next system fails.
Right. Now, you note in your book that there is intensive emphasis on medical care, even when the treatment is as debilitating as the disease, even when there's no possibility of a cure. We often see this with cancer patients, for instance, even when the benefits of treatment are slight. I mean, I get disturbed about, hearing about patients who are treated with medication that's costing $100,000 a year, and it makes them very sick, it almost debilitates them, and maybe it extends their lives by 3 months.
Right.
Not a good thing.
Not at all.
But doctors seem to be unable to talk frankly with patients and their families about the limits of the futility, as you would say, of care. And often families of patients don't want to hear it. Do you think patients want to hear that, okay, we could do this for you, but this is all it's going to do for you? It's going to make you very sick. It might give you a few months. Do you think patients want to hear it?
I think in some cases, yes, they need to hear it. For a long time, we thought that we could cure death. We thought that we could cure cancer. We thought that we could just keep extending the human lifespan. And I think that promise of medicine has changed our culture. It has made us look at death as something that is unspeakable and taboo to discuss. I think also within the medical field, it has shaped the way that doctors are educated. Up until 10 years ago, just alleviating pain was not, the specialty of palliative medicine was not taught. It wasn't approved by the AMA. And so doctors can graduate from medical college and never have the discussion about how to deliver terminal diagnoses. So we never focused on this end-of-life issue.
The focus is all, we're going to beat it, we're going to beat it.
Yes.
And you beat it until the patient's dead, you know. Many Americans, in fact, a majority of Americans, according to what I read, say they support aid in dying. And you say it makes a difference in how you couch it, you know, whether it's aid in dying or assisted suicide. Americans don't like the idea of assisted suicide, but many support aid in dying. But there has been a huge pushback against it. I mean, how many states allow aid in dying or assisted suicide, whatever you want to call it, whichever?
There are 5 states now.
Only 5.
Oregon in 2008, or in 1994, Washington in 2008, Montana by a legal court case, Vermont by the legislature. So there are a number of ways that these laws are being passed.
Okay.
But
not New York.
Not New York, although there's both a law case, a civil case, as well as a legislative measure.
Okay. And the Catholic Church and perhaps some other Christian churches, and it seems to me Republicans tend to be powerful opponents of aid in dying.
Right. If you ask the general public, 68% will say, if asked properly, if asked clearly about the measure, and you and I just mentioned the use of language and how that affects people's answers, 68% say this should be legal. But as we know with other issues about the human body, say abortion, Catholics and evangelicals have allied themselves around a quote-unquote pro-life position. And in all of these cases, these activist organizations wishing to stop abortion, there is some conversation about what they would call euthanasia. The Catholic Church manages 1/5 of all hospitals in the country, and so their soft power, as it is changing and waning, they're losing members. Their hard power is still very relevant. We saw that when the Affordable Care Act discussion was taking place.
Right, because there was discussion of just having insurance pay for end-of-life discussions about, and that was that removed from the Affordable Care Act?
It was. Sarah Palin's death panel conversation.
Okay.
It was huge and ugly, and it was just reinstated. So within the past year, payment is now possible for doctors to talk about end-of-life with patients. Okay.
But basically, when you have Catholic churches, and a lot of Catholic churches that dominate healthcare in various regions, there's not going to be any kind of aid in dying, I assume.
Right. So even in the states where it's legal, California in December legalized, that's 40 million people.
Right.
So 1 in 6 of us live in a state where it's legal. And the Catholic Church, any of the hospitals that are operated there will not comply. And they legally aren't required to. They are exempt.
Okay, and we know of any number of cases over time, Terry Chavot, other cases of people who have been kept on life support long after they've been pronounced in a vegetative state, brain dead, but they're still kept on
Yeah, and Cheryl, there's one thing you just said, life support, and I think doctors and bioethicists are now saying physiological support.
Yeah.
Because the question of whether Terri Schiavo was alive is very much a question.
Okay.
So every state approves removal of feeding tubes or respirators.
Right.
If the patient or the family ask for removal of any kind of treatment, that is legal. That came out of the Nancy Cruzan case, a woman who was very much like Terri Schiavo. And so it's legal. But in hospitals that have a very strict policy, it is up to the discretion of the hospital director,
Right.
in conjunction with his local bishop, and not the patient.
Right. And a family who wants to have a patient taken off life support might have to go to court, go through a long court battle.
And it's horrible. If
Yeah.
you are already in that situation, so full of grief and challenge and not knowing what to do, you are looking for an authority to give you direction.
Okay.
And if the hospital is not giving you informed consent, it's very difficult.
I pretty much conclude that when I get really, really, really old and sick, I'm probably going to start smoking and drinking and and being upset, and probably smoking marijuana. How about the use of marijuana as a palliative for older people and who are sick?
Yeah, I wrote about this about my patient Evelyn, who we had mentioned. She was a doctor, she was very wealthy, and she had come up in an era where marijuana was a gateway drug and it was hideous, and she had seen all sorts of things in the ER that prevented her from ever wanting to try it. But she was also a lifelong smoker. And so she and I got the irony of this legal drug as opposed to an illegal drug. And she said to me, "Do you think marijuana will make me feel better?" And I said, let's give it a shot. And it did. It worked for her. And I think she had to get over the stigma of marijuana.
Right.
And it made her so much calmer.
Right. And again, there's only a limited number of states where marijuana is legal.
Right. But you know, we've always used a particular kind of morality when discussing drugs or substances. And I think in some ways it's very arbitrary how we decide what is and is not legal.
What kind of end-of-life assistance does Medicare provide? You suggest there's some, but you suggest that it's not enough in many, many cases.
It's not enough in many cases because it's not livable. You have to have an address in order to receive Medicare. You have to go through a crazy amount of paperwork to make sure that it's accessible. You have to have someone at home to help you get through the day. So even if you're on hospice, you can have about 4 hours of care through the hospice program, which is paid for by Medicare.
Right.
If you are
But that doesn't cover, the whole day.
It doesn't cover anything. No,
right.
If you have an immobile patient who is, say, incontinent, what do they do the other 20 hours?
Yeah.
So we haven't addressed this at all. We can talk about hospice is great and it's used so frequently, and we can talk about patients who should be saving for their retirement or long-term care, but there's a huge gap in between. 50% of the homeless are over the age of 50.
Right, right. What changes would you like to see made in sort of Medicare policy to deal with end-of-life patients?
I think we need to rethink end of life, that term. There are people who are dying for a lot longer than used to. It takes longer to go through the dying process now. For too long, we have relied on patients or people to make their own preparations. We still have over 30 million Americans without health insurance. That means without preventive care. That means without proper access to even good food. So in a host of ways, we have left self-reliance as our ultimate crutch, and it is not going to ever address the disparity that's built into our healthcare, education, housing systems.
You write that that all of us need to spend more time with the dying. Why?
Because it will come for us, because we'll be there someday, because if we're wedded to the idea, as we should be, that diversity means something in our culture, old people are people too, and spending time with them can teach us quite a bit.
Your father was unhappy, and you were unhappy, your family was unhappy with the kind of death that your father had. In the end, you concluded that there is no good death.
Yeah, I think I say in the book that there's a good enough death. You can get as close as possible, but it's always going to hurt. Family members will always feel left behind, and absence is profound.
And what would in terms of the dying patient, what would constitute a good enough death in your view?
In my view, it's whatever the patient wants. And we forget that very often. We assume that there must be a proper way to die, or that we should care for family members, but it's really up to the patient.
And I guess the idea is that we should really listen to them as
Right.
opposed to,
Making them invisible.
right, or as opposed to listening to the Catholic Church or politicians or
Right.
family members who want to keep them around in a vegetative state, to listen to
Right.
them. It's really an interesting book, and I think many people will find it very thought-provoking.
Thank you.
And it's
very
certainly
much.
a timely subject, as all of us get older.
Yeah.
We're out of time. I want to thank Ann Newman for joining me today. The Good Death, An Exploration of Dying in America has just been published by the Beacon Press. For the City University of New York and One to One, I'm Cheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.